For my last TC4 versus TC8 test, there was one thing everyone seemed to be talking about: weight. So I wanted to find out, how much difference does weight really make in a 1/10 scale RC touring car? For this test, I took my 3 Racing Zero Cero and gradually added up to 120 grams of extra weight. Same car, same setup, same track. And the result genuinely surprised me. Let's get started. Before we begin, let's take a look at our starting weight. 1,329 grams, completely ready to run. One quick note: for the later measurements, I weighed the car without the body. So all the additional weight steps are based on exactly the same reference. But today, the absolute number isn't really what matters. What matters is how much weight we add. So let's hit the track. Our reference lap is 27.336 seconds. That's the benchmark for everything that follows. Now let's add the first 20 grams. Total weight, 1,349 grams. I'll be honest, I expected to see at least a small difference. Same track, same setup, same driver. And the lap time? 27.328 seconds. Wait a second. The car is heavier, but the lap time is practically identical. Just 8 thousandths of a second difference. For me, that's not a real performance difference. So let's add some more. Another 40 grams goes into the car. That means we're now running with 60 grams of additional weight. Surely we should start seeing something now. Back onto the track. A few more laps, and then we check the stopwatch. 27.313 seconds. Now this is getting crazy. With 60 grams of additional weight, the car still isn't slower. In fact, this is actually the fastest lap of the test so far. Of course, I'm not saying that adding weight makes the car faster. We're talking about just 23 thousandths of a second. But one thing is becoming pretty clear. Up to 60 grams, I'm seeing practically no measurable disadvantage. And now the test starts getting really interesting. Because next, we're entering a range where I could actually start to feel the extra weight while driving. Now things are getting a little extreme. We're up to 100 grams of additional weight. And to be honest, there simply isn't enough space in the Zero Cero to mount that much weight properly. So I had to attach a large part of it directly on top of the battery. Of course, that also raises the center of gravity, which is far from ideal. The total ready-to-run weight is now 1,429 grams. And this was the first point where I could really feel the additional weight on the track. The car felt slightly more sluggish and heavier through direction changes. But here's the important question. What does the stopwatch say? 27.436 seconds. For the first time, we're actually slower. But compared with our original 27.336 second reference lap, adding 100 grams has cost us just 1/10 of a second. And remember, the additional weight isn't even positioned optimally in the car. So I thought, if we've come this far, we might as well go all the way. Another 20 grams goes in. We're now running with 120 grams of additional weight for a total ready-to-run weight of 1,449 grams. That's almost 9% more weight than when we started. And yes, at this point you can definitely feel it. The car feels heavier and doesn't react quite as effortlessly as before. But it's still completely manageable and easy to drive. So what was the fastest lap? 27.442 seconds. Just think about that for a moment. At 1,329 grams, I drove a 27.336. With 120 grams more weight, I drove a 27.442. That's a difference of just 0.106 seconds. And a large part of that extra weight is sitting on top of the battery. I definitely did not expect that result. Because now there's an even more interesting question. What would happen if those extra 120 grams weren't sitting high in the car, but instead were positioned as low as possible? For example, with a heavier chassis? And that brings us to the conclusion. So, what do I take away from this test? We started at 1,329 grams with a 27.336 second lap. By the end, the Zero Cero was 120 grams heavier and still managed a 27.442. That's a difference of only 0.106 seconds. And I find that genuinely surprising. I only really started to feel the additional weight once we reached around 100 grams. And remember, the weight distribution was far from ideal. A large part of it had to be mounted on top of the battery, which actually made the center of gravity worse. So my conclusion is not weight doesn't matter. My conclusion is total weight alone seems to have much less influence on lap times than we might think. What could be much more important is where that weight is located in the car. Maybe that's exactly what we should test next. Would you have expected 120 grams of additional weight to cost only around 1/10 of a second? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next test. Keep racing.